Been another busy morning for Newcastle United. Eddie Howe holding his press conference ahead of that huge crunch game against Brighton and Hove Albion at St James's Park. And yeah, it just seems like there's so much to talk about with Newcastle United at the moment. And Eddie Howe holding a bumper 40-minute press conference with journalists this morning. Asked lots of questions about the game, Newcastle's current position, their European hopes and dreams. Talking about the prospect of having to sell players, which was put to him. Not something that anybody around here will be suggesting, of course, because you don't want to lose your best players. But Newcastle's success has meant that players like Bruno Guimaraes and Alexander Isak are attracting attention from bigger clubs. And Eddie Howe, as a man in the hot seat, has got to deal with that. And deal with it he did, to be fair, today in the press conference. I mean, let's just start on that because that was the subject of quite a few questions. Talking about, is he going to have to sell players this summer? We're all now becoming well rehearsed with FFP and PSR rules, which, as we've seen, are a real thing. Everton and Nottingham Forest finding that out to their cost, and Newcastle United just do not want to be a team that ends up in that situation where you're getting points taken off you. And it's one of the worst things that can happen to any sporting organisation is points deductions. So Newcastle know that they have to manoeuvre that type of market. But by the same token, Eddie Howe today saying there's no weakness at the club. There's no one who has the desire to sell the best players, and those players are Isak and Bruno Guimaraes. So very strong on that was Eddie Howe this morning. I think he made it clear that Newcastle will again have to cut their cloth accordingly. Callum Wilson, another player whose future was spoken about. Callum Wilson speaking to journalists after the Burnley game the other day. He was asked about his future, and he said, you can basically say what you want. I've got a contract here, and I'm expecting to be here pre-season, but that doesn't mean that Newcastle may not have to sell a player like Callum Wilson. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that, because Eddie Howe basically today, while he wasn't referring to Callum Wilson, speaking very openly about the prospect of somebody will have to go in order to balance the books, if you like. And that's something that Eddie Howe must be looking at, and must be looking at seriously, how he's going to do this, because he does need to bring in probably 2, 3, 4 senior players in the summer. He might get away with 3, but he's got Sandro Tonali back from his ban in August, so he does have that. And we hate that term, like a new signing, but unfortunately we have to use it for Tonali. So there's lots of positives, lots of people back from injury as well, so it's going to be an interesting summer. Talking about the game itself, as we know, Eddie Howe and his players won't be able to celebrate clinching that European spot tomorrow, because it's so tight going into the last 3 games. If they win, they're going to have to wait and see what happens in the other games. Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, and Man United, Arsenal. If Newcastle can get a win and there's 2 defeats in those games, then they're pretty much going to be needing 1 point from the last 2. So yeah, it could go right down the wire. It could go the last day. Something Eddie Howe isn't delighted about, but that's where they are because of the mid-season slump. That's kind of caught up with them now. And while they have been on a good run, the problem is that they're going to have to probably fight until the last kick to get this European place. So we'll keep an eye on other results this weekend. Brighton, a tough game. Finally, a wrap up. I've already predicted that Newcastle will win it and win it comfortably. But let's remember, they're not a bad side. They really did show Newcastle what they were made of in the 3-1 win back in September down on the south coast. And Newcastle will have to be very wary about the threat posed by Brighton this weekend. So lots to talk about, lots to recap. Fitness-wise, Kieran Trippier, late fitness test. Fabian Schär won't be back. And Eddie Howe still not quite sure if it's time to change goalkeeper yet between Pope and Dubravka. We'll have to wait and see. But Joe Linton, Miguel Almiron, they're back, and it's going to be interesting to see that team sheet when it drops tomorrow afternoon.